Good stewards. Those two words pretty much say it all about this year's Harvey Weil Award winners. If there ever was a powerhouse couple in the field of wildlife conservation, it would be Blair and Joseph Fitzsimons. Joseph and Blair's contributions to the field of conservation are beyond measure. Good stewards, good people.
My parents grew up in San Antonio, and I was raised there. Went to Howard Elementary, then to St. Mary's Hall, and then I went away. I went to boarding school in New Hampshire and college in New Jersey, and then I was working in Boston and trying to find my way back to Texas, and then I met this fella, and that's how I got back to Texas.
I was born in San Antonio and grew up back and forth between this ranch and San Antonio. I went to grade school in San Antonio, went to TMI, and then went off to school like Blair on the East Coast, and went to college on the West Coast, and came home really because of this ranch. I met her and I fell in love with her. We obviously had a lot of things in common, enjoyed the outdoors, and it was just one of those things. Had to happen.
From the very beginning, even before we were married, we knew that we would end up back at this ranch. It was part of our partnership, if you will, that we were going to come back and live here and raise our kids here and run this ranch. And so when our second child, our son Johnny, was born, that day Joseph quit his job at the law firm in San Antonio, and we officially moved to the ranch.
The Fitzsimons operated their family's 45,000-acre cattle ranch from 1989 to 2003 near the Mexican border, with more than 1,000 cattle at the time and several dozen horses. There, they found a true passion in working and living on the land. In 2006, after years of earning local and regional recognition, the ranch received the National Cattlemen's Beef Association Environmental Stewardship Award.
The ranch is a Spanish land grant. The Spanish mission's right across the river from us, so we were on the Camino Real. So people have been coming by here for a long time. The spring, where the ranch gets its name, the San Pedro Spring, is the only live water between the Rio Grande and the Nueces. So it was regularly visited. My grandfather bought the ranch during the Depression, 1932. Certainly growing up on this ranch and then later operating this ranch, you learn the value of water pretty quickly. And that spring is symbolic, I think, of stewardship. I certainly don't want it to go dry on my watch.
Blair Calvert Fitzsimons possesses an unyielding love of her native Texas, coupled with a determination for preserving the state's 144 million acres of farms and ranches in her work as Executive Director of the Texas Agricultural Land Trust.
The Texas Agricultural Land Trust was created in 2008 by leaders from several statewide agricultural and hunting organizations. And they asked me to facilitate the startup. Then they asked me to become the first executive director. And so I've been on board ever since, and it's been a labor of love. We've done a lot of good work, and we've worked with some very conservation-minded stewards, families who love their land and want to do everything they can to leave it in better shape for the next generation, and including protecting it permanently against future development. And so the conservation easement, which is the tool that we use, is essentially a way to codify that love of the land, and that's what they did. The Texas Agricultural Land Trust today has conservation easements on almost 225,000 acres. which makes it one of the largest, if not the largest, land trust, state-based or regional local land trust in Texas. There is a lot more meeting of the minds, if you will, between the agricultural community and the conservation community. We've come on pretty strong in a pretty short period of time. I think we all understand on both sides that our agricultural lands, our working farms and ranches provide and hold our natural resource base in Texas. When it rains in Texas, it falls on private-owned land, so we need to work together to conserve that. In many ways, my work at the Texas Agricultural Land Trust is just a continuation of the good work that Joseph started a number of years before me. I'm just continuing the good work that he started.
Joseph Fitzsimons is a natural resources, oil and gas, and water law attorney and third-generation South Texas rancher. He has served as vice president of the Texas Wildlife Association and as a director of the Texas and Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association. In 2003, Joseph Fitzsimons was appointed chairman of the Texas Parks and Wildlife Commission.
I think my father was the first one that took a real interest in wildlife. He brought Jim Teer, who was a mentor of mine, Dr. Jim Teer, here in the early 60s to conduct some research. My first experience with Parks and Wildlife was when I went to work for Parks and Wildlife in high school. I was 17 years old, and I went out to Black Gap Wildlife Management Area. And I was so fascinated with the work that was being done and so impressed with the employees and how dedicated they were to conservation. I thought, you know, this is a special organization, and it never occurred to me that I would ever be on the commission, much less chairman of the commission. But it was a great opportunity to see how things happen on the ground, which is what Parks and Wildlife is all about. The issue that I was primarily interested in was providing water for wildlife, making sure that as we made some very important planning decisions in Texas on water, that those decisions didn't leave out the very system that made everything else possible. I became pretty passionate about the parks because I realized that what I grew up with is not available to urban Texas, and it really struck me when I was spending that time in Austin that Texas is an urban state now. And if you want people to appreciate the great natural world we have in Texas and the incredible resources we have throughout the different ecoregions, they have to be exposed to it. And parks are the way to do that. The land doesn't know what your affiliation is, doesn't know how you vote, doesn't know what organizations you belong to. As Aldo Leopold said, all that matters is what actually happens on the back 40. Thanks to Blair's work at TALT, for the first time there was really an organization that a ranching family could look to hold a conservation easement that appreciated that convergence of agriculture and wildlife management. That's where the rubber meets the road, and that's what counts for conservation. So Blair's organization was the first one that we felt comfortable as a family-owned ranch doing a conservation easement with. Also, this ranch had been through a partition, and my sister and I did not want that to happen again. My sister's a very passionate conservationist, and you know, she's the perfect partner. Some people say I'm the kite and she's the tail. She keeps me well grounded, but her focus is always on what's best for the land. And when we discussed this, I thought there might be some hesitancy, and she was really the one that convinced me. to do it, because what the conservation easement does is it allows you to protect the land from fragmentation, from being partitioned, being chopped up smaller and smaller, which is not viable for agriculture, and it's not viable certainly for wildlife conservation.
We've got all this wonderful farm and ranch and wildlife lands out there, and they provide water that we drink and the clean air that we breathe and wildlife habitat and recreational opportunities. And I think unless we as a state understand the value of that, we're going to be in trouble. So my wish for the future is that we have a deep and broad understanding of the public benefits provided by private lands.
I'd like to see more, I guess you'd call it natural resource, what's the term, natural resource literacy in our schools, more opportunities to get out, and of course I'm going back to the need for more state parks and city and county parks, so that where people live, they can access the outdoors. And I think if they have that first experience, they might be more likely to travel a little bit and go to a bigger state park. I'd like to thank the Harvey Weil Committee for this great honor. I feel like we're in the company of some very remarkable people, including my stepfather, Bill Negley, who I think was one of the earlier recipients, my neighbor and good friend Stuart Stedman, another great sportsman conservationist. I'm not sure I belong there. I know she does, but thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. We're deeply honored, and as Joseph said, we've got some tall boots to fill with the people that have come before us. So we thank the committee for this honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, the winners of the 2015 Rotary Club of Corpus Christi Harvey Weil Sportsman Conservationist Award, Blair and Joseph Fitzsimons, a couple for all seasons.